Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. Jill froze in the yard with a stack of firewood and a bucket of milk. She listened. The neighbor John returned from the north. Her heart at first thudded with excitement, and then, as if livened up again. His wife welcomes him with joyful shouts. Excitedly, their children make noise. The yard dog bursts with unrestrained barking. The happy family meets the husband and father. John hands out gifts to the children on the go. Jill sees him kissing his wife, and it could have been her happiness and her joy instead of loneliness in the company of an elderly mother. Tom the cat keeps trying to push the milk bucket that Jill was holding, pushing Tom away. She goes out on the porch with a sigh. Jean laughed out loud, but it had been a long time since she had laughed. It had been a long time since she had laughed. It had been 15 years, and he was still her one and only love. They had broken up foolishly, and in 2 fateful weeks, all of Jill's future and happiness had been undone. We're never going to break up, are we? Right, Gil. I could never love anyone as much as I love you, honey. Looking for them in the shade by the river, they lay on the grass and listened to the birds chirping in the crowns of the tall poplars, and the echoes carried the sounds of people swimming in the river to them across the water. John took Jill's hand and regarded the sunlight on her skin, and the color of her hair seemed golden. He kissed her hand, pressed it to his cheek, and squeezed it shut. Jill's sincerity, her trustworthiness, and her ability to give her whole self bribed. There are no other girls like her. 1 in a million. That everything was perfect, body and soul and mind. It seemed to him that he was too unsightly for her not. He worried a lot. Are you sure you can wait for me? My God, John, what are you doing again? It's only 1 year to serve you. We'll correspond and I'll study harder because I'm too lazy. I barely passed medical history and general pathology last year. My girl, I won't see you in your robe for a year. Vitya turned sullen again. But seriously, there are a lot of guys. And you are so beautiful. Long blonde hair that turns to gold in the sun and the green of her wide and deep eyes. She is a sturdy, healthy, tall girl. John himself was of thin build. It's been more than a year since they've been dating. We've been friends for 16 years. Don't you trust me? I don't trust Paul. He's always running up to you. We're just friends. He's behind in his studies, and I'm helping out. He went to school with you on purpose. He hasn't needed medicine in 100 years. John did not relent and nervously rubbed the black strand of his hair, as was his habit. How can I prove it to you? And how do you prove that I'm only yours? She suddenly lay down on her elbows. Do you want me to give it all to you right now? That's what you want. You often say at night. John was taken aback. Are you ready? Is that what you want too? I'm yours forever. And if that's what you want, take it. We're getting married anyway. He looked at her hesitantly. The proposal was too sudden. Jill was always stopping him, telling him she wasn't ready, that she had to wait until the wedding. John reached out and pressed Jill against him, their lips meeting. There was fear in Jill's eyes. Of course, the first time. As for him, she trembled with excitement, but she did not remove his hand, running it under her dress. Is this how it should be, right here in the grass? John, stretching his shorts, and somewhere in there, behind the shroud of lust, were skulking thoughts and doubts. He was about to satisfy his long-standing interest and desire and find out what it felt like and lose nothing. What about Jill? Is that what she wants? She only gives and sacrifices herself to him, gives him her innocence to dispel his doubts. What she would have wanted was for things to be right. After the wedding? No, Jill, I don't. I so want you to feel happy afterwards, not tormented. Unfortunately, after the wedding, as soon as I get back, straight to the registry office. Done. He held her by the chin and tried to read agreement in those green, almost transparent eyes. Agree with what? I guess John was noble, he thought. Yes, he was. There was a blush on Jill's cheeks, and she nodded and straightened her dress. In the fall, John turned 18 and was drafted into the army. Jill wrote him romantic letters, very naive but very sweet. John responded dryly, but only from the fact that he was not a master of words, not able to express his thoughts beautifully. Jill's friend Paul felt free and brave. It was dangerous to go into battle in front of John. For sure he'd get caught. John had already noticed how much he annoyed the idiot with his unspoken but well-known crush on Jill. Only Jill herself didn't notice these feelings, writing off the close communication and affection to an ancient friendship from childhood. "Jill, I love you," Paul said, looking at her with crazy eyes from behind the pile of textbooks they were studying for their final session. "Paul, what are you doing?" Jill smiled. "I'm with John. We're fine." "What is it, John?" "Listen." The boy became bold and pushed aside the stack of books that stood between them. The stack swayed and collapsed chaotically on the notes. "With me, you'll live without a care in the world. My parents have money. They'll buy us a house if I just snap my fingers, and a car later and everything. And what can John give you on a penny salary? His parents are paupers and he'll be like that. He joined the army. Only losers go there who can't pay off." "Shut up," shouted Jill and stood up noisily, pushing back her chair. "Don't you ever talk about your greatness again. I thought there was friendship between us. But you don't love me. Since you want to buy me, I'm not for sale. What a fool. Still think again before John gets back. Get out." Jill pointed him to the door of his room. Paul was angry too, hurriedly gathering up his notes while he couldn't see Jill, hiding between his notebooks a letter from John that he'd spotted on the corner of his desk an hour ago, an address in an envelope, and he could use it. "I went to that stupid college because of you. I didn't need this medicine for nothing," he said at the door. "Go away," Jill sarcastically exclaimed. "Those who are in love but cannot really love because of their overdeveloped selfishness are capable of the meanest and most desperate deeds. They understand that they have done something terrible only afterwards, when the object of their desires falls with their help into the mud and tramples others into it, and no one needs them. But they are not too sorry since she did not wait for him, so at least it does not hurt to live knowing that no one got her. John, are you back? Why didn't you answer me? Not a word for 2 months. Why didn't you come to me yesterday?" As soon as John opened the door, Jill hung around his neck and then eagerly began to examine his face. How he got older, prettier, taller, and stronger. Now he seemed older than Jill, and before the army it had been the other way around. John showed no joy at meeting him. Coldly, even squeamishly, he dismissed Jill. "There's no reason for me to go to you anymore. We've parted ways, Jill." "What's the matter?" The girl froze. "You know you couldn't wait for me. You couldn't take it. Yes, I understand a year without a boyfriend, and you're a young girl. And you're a young girl, and you're so pretty. I know everything." "What do you know?" "I don't understand anything." "I know everything. I don't even want to talk about these abominations." "John, what have they told you about me?" "It's all lies." John glares, then reaches around Jill's neck and pulls a gold chain with a pendant out from under her shirt. A beautiful piece. Jill brushed it off carelessly. "Oh yes, it was Paul who gave it to me. We had a big fight with him, begged forgiveness, begged him not to take it off." "Yeah," John agreed, looking at the evidence of her infidelity with his own eyes. John himself had been collecting on such a chain for 2 years. He backed away from her and hid his hands in his pants pockets. "I don't want to talk about it, Gil. It only hurts my wounds. My wounds are barely healed. I can't be with you no more, and I hate to see you. Goodbye." He started to close the door. Jill blocked the jam with her shoulder, but John pushed her away and clicked the lock. "John, open up. I didn't cheat on you. It's all lies. Let's talk." She knocked on the door, begged him to come out, told him she didn't understand, but to no avail. In the end, she decided to let him cool off and judge him tomorrow. But tomorrow John was long gone, and Jill was knocking on his door again. He went to his uncle in the city to work there and told me not to give you his phone number or address. He only asked me to tell you that he doesn't love you anymore. I'm sorry, daughter. John's mother looked out of the window. Jill had fallen ill. The first few days felt like hell. It was scary to look at her. Her mother cried. Her father became gloomy with her. And even her little sister, Lily, tiptoed around the house. It's Paul, your guy. He's the one who's been rubbing up against you. No other way. I knew it, daughter, that rumors would start. And I told you, and you were all trust, 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 trust. Mom, he loves me, and told me every day that he wished me and John to be happy. And for him, the joy is that I will be happy. Jill really didn't believe yet that a man could be capable of such meanness. No, it was someone from the village who was jealous, but it was still worth checking out. They met Paul at the college. When he saw Jill, he glowed. So his plan had worked. What a fool that John was. The odds were 50-50, and yet his scam had gone bad. Without saying hello, Jill grabbed him by the sweater, and Paul almost hung off the ground. Did you spit it out? Tell me now, or I'll kill you if I find out later. Jill, what are you doing? This has nothing to do with me. Why would I do that, knowing how much you love him? All I want is what's best for you. Jill let him go. The students in white coats walking back and forth. She was so lousy. She hadn't heard from John, and she and Paul had drifted apart too. He wasn't interested in Jill anymore. He was about to leave college to go to engineering next year. Jill didn't have any close friends left. Some had gone away to study and lived in a dormitory in the city, and some had settled their personal lives. Suddenly, 5 months later, the mystery of their separation from Paul came to light. The mystery was accidentally solved by Lily, who was a frequent visitor to the Smiths' house. At Paul's house, she was friends with their youngest girl, Grace. They wandered into her brother's room out of curiosity and stumbled upon his diary. Oh, Mommy, it says so much. Lily's eyes rounded. It's all about Jill and how he loves her in the beginning, and then how he's going to get what he deserves. That he wrote a letter to John supposedly about sleeping with Jill behind his back, you know? Lily was embarrassed and cried. That our Jill is sleeping with him for gifts, for gold. You remember he gave her that necklace and pendant, that long one. He wrote about John that the gifts were an investment in his and John's future because he was a pauper. So at least they'd sell the gold and have something to live on. And Paul himself is a jerk. He sleeps and sees how our Jill was left at the bottom of the barrel in retaliation for not wanting to go to him. Her mother waited until Jill returned from college, met her on the doorstep. She tore that ill-fated necklace from her neck with one swipe of her hand. Jill was outraged. Jill grabbed her neck. It was painful. God damn your Paul, God damn him. She hopped into her yard galoshes, threw on her jacket, and flew across the village looking for Paul. Uncomprehending, Jill stayed home. Lily guiltily initiated her sister into the revelations. But Jill's mother, as tough and strong and tall as her daughter, it was better not to anger her. Her daughter had cried so many tears. She and Jill had cried so much herself, and all because of that rodent puppy. Oh, the wretch! Oh, such a bastard! The gold chain torn from her daughter glittered in the sun. The gate to the Smiths' rich yard was unlocked. The watchdog relaxed and hung on the chain with a hoarse grunt, but could not reach the woman, but jumped as he jumped. Damn, it's annoying. Nancy swung at him without any fear. Paul's mother came out toward him. Oh, Nancy, hi? Is something wrong? The floor of your house? Yes, her mother answered tensely and followed, barely keeping up with the wide stride of an enraged Nancy. I'm going to give him a good time. Nancy, wait, explain. You have no right to barge in like that. The woman indignantly tried to run forward. But Nancy had already opened the front door and turned sharply toward Paul's mother. And you wait here, she said. and pushed the frightened woman away with force and closed the door. The doors immediately slammed shut. Paul's mother shrieked desperately, and an intrigued son appeared in the hallway. "And I came from Jill with a greeting," said Nancy, and she pounced on Paul like a wolf. The boy was pinned against the wall. It wasn't nice to hit women, but he wasn't much good at it. There was just as much strength in Mom's muscles as there was in the guy's. She clamped the ill-fated chain around his neck and began strangling him. Paul was frightened out of his wits. Then she disarmed his arms with one left hand, and with her free hand began to thrust the chain into the boy's mouth between his tightly clenched teeth, and he mooed helplessly. "I'll show you how to take revenge on my daughter. I won't let you live, you bastard." Even though the truth came out, John's mother was extremely reluctant to share his new address with Jill. After all, so much time had passed, but let them work it out for themselves. That's what they are, young people. John let her in. Jill thought to herself how much she loved him. How nice to see him. They would finally be together again. "Do you believe me now? I never lied to you." "John, I can't live without you. I just exist." John was in no hurry to show joy, though Jill noticed that his eyes flashed with great feeling for a moment. "You see, Jill, it's been 5 months. I have another girlfriend now, and she's pregnant. I'm getting married. I'm sorry. Don't kill yourself, daughter. He is not worthy of your love. You will meet another good guy. Love yourself, that's all, and emotions will pass." Her mother put a cup of tea in front of Jill and sat across from her. The woman looked sympathetically at Jill's sunken face. She was ready to tear anyone for her daughter, as she wanted happiness for her daughter. And outwardly good and inwardly good and inwardly good and smart, how could fate have hurt her so much? But from her own experience, of course, Jill's mother knew that it wasn't her looks or even her intelligence that made her happy. There was something else, more fortunate, incidental. Jill remained indifferent to everything, finishing college on automatic, helping her mother around the house, and there was an emptiness in her soul. Her mother and father, of course, saw it all, tried to get her to talk, because when you speak out, it is always easier, as if you share your misfortune with someone. No one else saw her tears, only the pillow. Time was in no hurry to heal. It took Jill a year and a half to recover. She knew that John had a son, knew that he visited his mother and his wife occasionally, but she never showed her face to him, hiding while they were visiting. After college, Jill was assigned to a nearby community center. Lucky enough to be close to home, she took a position as a nurse at a health clinic. She began to live in the dormitory. She was a pretty girl, and she blossomed even more. Lots of people were looking at her, guys and men alike, but after the double blow from John and Paul, Jill was distrustful of all men, and then suddenly she got married at 23. You're always alone, and then suddenly you're married. Her friends were surprised and even jealous. Jill's husband, Adam, was no one but a local college professor, but the fact that he was 10 years older was a plus. Jill was already smiling. Her parents were shocked at first to hear the news. They didn't get married. They got married quietly. The parents were happy for their daughter. Finally, Jill could open her heart to another man. And Jill herself twirled the wedding ring in her hands and was glad that all was now well. Even if she didn't love Adam as much as she used to, even if she went to bed with him without a light. But Adam was wonderful, so reliable, caring, sweet, warm, and good with him. Like a best friend, like a soulful book in winter by the stove. At first, she and Adam lived in his parents' spacious apartment, but they quickly got their own apartment from the government. The months passed quietly and peacefully. Jill was happy, but she couldn't forget John. She knew she still loved him, but she couldn't forget John. She knew she still loved him, but she tried hard not to think about him. She wanted a child, but she couldn't get pregnant, even though the doctor said there was nothing wrong with her health, and repeatedly suggested that her husband be examined, but Jill kept putting it off. She didn't want to hurt his feelings. 8 years passed, and suddenly such darkness overtook Jill's quiet life. as if a light bulb had suddenly gone out. Adam died suddenly of brain cancer, complaining in recent months of headaches, sometimes even vomiting. At first, the couple didn't give it much thought. Adam swallowed pills with agony, went to work, and then his condition deteriorated sharply, and they went to the hospital. But the treatment did not help. Being in their shared apartment was unbearable for Jill. She gave it up and moved in with her mother, who now lived alone. She quit her job, and while she was deciding how to live, she helped her mother with the cow and the household, and she forbade herself to think about a personal life, for Adam was too alive in her soul, too close and familiar. John and his family began to live in his mother's vacated house. He earns money up north, visits home every 3 to 4 months, and his wife, A. Jill alone knows with whom his wife takes comfort in his absence, but that's their business. She won't tell anyone. John comes home to his wife, always with gifts for everyone, and his wife walks hand in hand with him as if nothing had happened. When Jill returned and she and John met for the first time, he didn't bat an eye, as if there had been nothing between them. No betrayal, no lies, no feelings, while Jill found that her heart had never been more pounding and beating from her husband than it was from John. "Can I get some milk, Jill?" In a friendly way, John peeked over the fence at her. "I won't buy you a drink, but I'll sell you one," Jill said. "You and I are friends." "Right." Jill looked at him, trying to catch some secret implication or some reminder of their former love, some hint of regret or sympathy. But it was as if John had forgotten all about it and had no idea that he had caused her much pain. "Yeah, neighbor. If you take milk and bring a can, I don't have any extra." John took the jar and the money, and that was the end of the conversation. He would go away, then come back again, and each time Jill would freeze at the sound of his voice. Each time she would feel sadness and longing in her heart, and she would not know where to go next. Why go when her heart was breaking, and it was empty? "Jill," Lily wrote to me, inviting you to visit her for a couple of months, or even to stay with her if you liked, to unwind, to see the world. Why don't you go with your daughter? I feel like a grandmother around here. Lily lived in another city, and Jill had never been to visit her. It was far away. Are you going to do the housework by yourself? Oh, yes, I can manage. I'm not an old woman yet, Go. I'm going. I'd have nothing to lose, Jill admitted. Maybe there, away from home, away from the things that for so many years had prevented her from breathing deep and pulled her into the past, she would be able to start her life over again. Eva, bring my husband back. He'll drink himself to death. I'll give you a hard time. I'll never forgive you. I won't forgive you. Jill, who had stepped out onto the porch and had just had time to breathe in the damp air, shuddered. It was unfamiliar territory. She had arrived early, almost at night, the city still slumbering. A man's voice sounded so close and unexpected that it even startled her. Her sister's house was 2 houses away. A young man in a cap stood under the neighbor's window, and after demanding the phrase mentioned, tapped on the glass. With a rumble, the window pane fell away, and Eva's hysterical voice sounded to the whole neighborhood, as if a song had started up. What do I need your forgiveness for? You're both going down to the bottom of the river, aren't you? He won't forgive me. I won't forgive him. And you better get out of here before I sick Simon on you. I'm like a best friend to Simon, Steve muttered. Simon barked as he chewed on the dirty bone, wagged his tail, ran to the man in a friendly manner, licked his hand, then looked around as if he couldn't figure out who to take. Steve stroked his ear. That's it, Steve. Go away for good. You're already giving me the pressure. Eva, but he loves. Forgive him. Have pity on him. Eva frowned with thin eyebrows, closed the ventilator with a ringing sound, pulled the curtains close to be sure. Steve stood hesitating, then took out a cigarette, smoked it, turned around, and then his gaze fell on Jill, who had been watching the scene involuntarily but with interest, and now as if she had come out of her stupor and into reality, as it always does. Steve lifted his cap and, smiling, said, "Hello." The voice was gone. Jill pulled herself together and answered with a ringing voice. "Hello?" It was her first word after sleep. She came to visit. Steve stared at her, as if he wanted to strike up a conversation. But apparently no suitable topic came to mind, too unexpected an acquaintance. "All right, have a nice visit." "Thank you." Steve headed for the exit, opened the wicket. He gave way badly, then closed it, then opened and closed it again. This is where it jams. "Do you have a hammer?" he shouted to Jill, who was no longer paying attention to him because she saw the magnificent scenery on her way down the slope. "My God, it's beautiful. I don't know anything here." "Let me see. Just a minute." She returned confused, searched with her eyes, and came across a door. Must be the pantry. Searching in the pantry was successful. Jill brought tools to Steve and watched him fix the wicket. The man looked anxious and thoughtful. "Is everything all right with you?" suddenly Jill asked. Steve nodded. "Don't mind him. His brother and his wife had a fight. He messed up, cheated a little bit." Jill sighed. "They're all manly, just like the rest of them. They were saving up for a new TV for a long time, and Eddie went and spent the money. He bought her jewelry for her 20th birthday, a set of earrings and a ring. And he gave her a gift from the heart, and she freaked out. I didn't want them. Where are you going to wear them? You better get some fabric. It's inexpensive. I'd make you a shirt and a skirt, or just buy the kids some sweets." So she kicked him out. "Yeah, history. Well, it'll cool off. She'll realize he's in love with her." "Let's hope so. How long are you staying with us?" "For another month, and then we'll see." "Why can you stay?" "Stay." Steve suddenly changed. He finished and handed Jill the tools. He was swarthy and wiry, and his eyes were lively and blue from under his cap. "Stay," he repeated. "And you know how nice and warm it is here, and nature cures the heart, and our people are good kind. All the people are good," and he looked askew in the direction of the neighbor's house. "You mean Eve?" "Yes, she is a normal woman. She just has a weak nervous system. You have to be hysterical at times." "So why don't you stop?" Steve smiled again and adjusted his cap. "You're so fast. I need to take a closer look. I'll think about it." "Well, while you're thinking, come to the club on Saturday, look at the locals, and show yourselves. We have fun there. You'll get away in a jiffy. If there's any sadness, you'll forget at least until the morning." "I'm not sad at all." And the eyes are sad with longing. He shook Jill's hand. "By the way, my name is Steve. I'm Jill." He was a little too quick around the edges, but he'd barely said a word, and already he was asking me to stay and go to dances. I was a bit of a man of the world. But I was a bit of a womanizer who wouldn't miss a single skirt or an overly simple-minded man. Life had taught Jill to look closely and not to rule out either option until the last. Impressed, Jill thought of Steve and considered him as she waited for her host to come home. Lily's sister didn't live like everyone else, but she was comfortable. The rooms are tidy, clean. As a child, she did not like to clean and was often punished by Jill for the garbage in their bedroom. But as she grew up, she must have become a housewife. Her sister would be back from work soon, and her husband was in town today, selling fish at the market. Holding a cup of hot tea, Jill paced the house. There was furniture behind the glass, framed photographs on the wall, and one that she and Jill shared. Jill was touched, even though they hadn't been in close contact in years, and her little sister still had warm feelings for her sister. She was grown up, had a baby, and to Jill she would always be the little sister she had helped sew doll dresses for. While Jill waited, she cooked dinner, and soon Lily and her daughter returned from daycare. She worked there as a kindergarten teacher, and her husband came in from town. Jill handed the gift to the little girl. Other people's aunts had never given a 3-year-old baby a gift. She was shy, but she admired the doll all evening, not letting it out of her hands. The girl acted wary of her, but her aunt wanted so much to take her in her arms and cuddle her. Jill loved children and dreamed of her own. Her maternal instinct tormented her. Lily's bearded, fishy, smelling husband Earl poured wine. Everything is as it should be. Jill drank. She felt hot, coughing at first, and then warm. What do you think of our region? How's your first impression? Lily asked her. I'm sorry I've been alone all day. It just so happens that we were working. It's okay, Lily. I've been having a little fun. Your neighbor and her relative had a fight in the yard right in front of me, and it was fun. Steve must have been keeping his word for his brother again, Lily told her husband. Yeah, Steve. We chatted once. He asked me to the dance. Jill couldn't hold back a smile. What a quickie, Earl said approvingly. Isn't he a normal guy? He's a guitarist. We fish with him sometimes. He's a non-drinker. You'd think that would be a man's basic virtue. No, Jill, don't look at Steve. He's too easy for you. I don't look at all. The first day I got here, we just met by chance. That's good, because I have another fiancé in mind for you, a serious man, the head of the railroad station from the next town. Come on, Lily. I'm not looking for anyone. Jill was embarrassed. Earl clarified. You mean Derek, don't you? Yes. Why? Lily responded with a challenge. She wasn't pretty, but she was stately and pleasant, the same breed as her sister. Her husband was the same age as Jill. Nothing, Earl corrected his beard. A worthy man. We were on the same expedition. We became friends there, and then he came to visit me. He liked our region so much that he stayed here with his wife. He had already got a divorce, though. He talked too much. His wife stopped him. He's always looking at your picture when he comes to visit us, Jill. And he says, that's a beautiful sister you've got there. I'll invite him to come over and meet him. My God, I won't. Lily cut her off. After all, it's true. Our Jill is a beauty, Earl. And you wouldn't say she's 32. Yes, of course. Earl didn't dare object and smiled at Jill, though in his heart he thought she'd given up. The eyes didn't burn faintly, and the figure wasn't what it had been in her youth. The next day, Lily worked until lunchtime, and neither and Jill went to the lake. It's huge. Across miles of water on the opposite shore, there are hills that look like little mountains. And if you look to the left, the water is endless, as if it were the gulf of the sea, only there are no waves, ripples across the water not hiding. On Saturday, they left the baby in her father's care and went to a club. Jill put on makeup and dressed up. Surprisingly, the club was not playing a tape recorder, but live music, and Steve was giving the music to the world. People crowded around him on the wooden porch of the club. He was playing his guitar, very soulful and with feeling. His gray cap slid down to his side. He sat with his eyes squeezed shut from the creative moment and played. The women didn't sing very well, and then Jill's heart sank. The hit of her youth is deep, fluttering, grasping at the most vulnerable strings of her soul, of joy. Stingy telegrams. How easily one could relate those lines to Jill's own life. When he finished playing, there was a shout from the crowd. Now something funnier. Steve played. Jill and Lily laughed, sang with everyone else, and went dancing. Then Steve put down his guitar and the club turned on the tape recorder. Steve noticed Jill while he was still playing. He walked over to her. You came after all. Very happy for you. It's really fun here. I didn't expect it. Favorably, Jill spoke to him. Are you a musician? Well, it's just for fun. I give music lessons to the kids at school. So you're a professional with an education. Jill wondered, but she wouldn't have been surprised to hear that because Steve was an excellent instrumentalist and singer. No, I love music since childhood. My father taught me to play the guitar, and by education, I am a physical education teacher. I teach physical education in parallel with music lessons. How impressed Jill was. Good for you, that's great. The evening was dark and crisp, the tall trees outside the club standing without moving a single leaf, a natural calm. Steve flirtatiously put his shoulder to her as if inviting her to dance with him. They twirled to slow music. So you like kids? I do. They are good, sincere. Do you have any of your own? I'm not sure I have any of my own, but I'm not going anywhere. She was fed up with country life, and she met someone there, but I'm not going anywhere. But that's okay, we'll catch up, we're still young. Was your brother accepted back into the family? No. Eva is still breaking down. He's standing there all sad. Look at him. Derek, Steve's brother, stout, red-headed in contrast to his brother, sat on the bench with glassy, drunken eyes watching them. He was sour, smiling at Jill. Poor bastard, said Jill sympathetically. She had a lovely evening, got to know the locals, all very friendly. Steve walked them home. He made them laugh the whole way home. He made them laugh the whole way home. They said goodbye like good friends. Jill washed off her makeup, tiptoed into the bedroom where little Kylie was sleeping in one of the two beds. She put on her nightgown and lay down. It had been a long time since she'd had an evening like this, as if she were in a different, happier life. As if she was different, lighter, more trusting and open. It was morning, and they went fishing with the company. Jill had no idea she would meet Steve there. He had decided to join them the night before. Apparently his brother-in-law blabbed to him that Jill was coming too. Oleg kept looking to meet her as they walked to the lake. In the morning twilight, everything seemed unreal to Jill, as if she was still asleep, because in the dark, everything is perceived differently. The colors are distorted. They met Steve on the road to the lake. They went down to the shore and set their fishing rods a little apart from each other. Jill was in the middle of it, and they exchanged languid phrases, all sleepy while the city grew lighter and lighter. Jill wasn't biting, so she got confused and started pulling her rod clumsily. Let me help you, and at the same time teach you. It's impossible for a beginner to cope here. Steve left his gear behind Jill and began to guide her hands and gently twist the line. Jill was slightly embarrassed by this unexpected proximity. The smell of cigarettes wafted in from Steve. He could smell something herbal in her hair. The scent of nettles or some other herb, I couldn't tell. As Jill's float and rod twitched violently, Steve knew she had caught a big fish. Like a true cavalier, he immediately rushed to the rescue. Jill looked at the fish with keen interest and smiled. "What have you got there?" shouted the boys. They were separated by a couple of conifers. "The white fish is a good one." "Great. I have pike and perch so far." The fish were getting good. Jill had learned 5. Her excitement and a kind of long, forgotten lightness and spontaneity overpowered her, as if she were a young girl without the weight of heavy memories behind her, laughing at Steve's jokes. She poured tea out of a thermos and got sandwiches and meatballs and a small tin of pickles. The sun had risen over the water, nature had awakened, and she could hear birdsong everywhere. "Oh, I'm ashamed to get my rations," Steve admitted. "I'm not much of a cook, and my dad's not much of a vision guy. And we don't have any women." "What about you?" Earl asked. "Lard on bread." Earl grimaced. "I don't like lard." "I love it. Let me eat," said Jill, and leaned back. Steve plopped down and unwrapped the lard and bread hidden in the newspaper. Jill set her patty sandwich aside. She didn't feel embarrassed, but pounced on Steve's ration. Steve hadn't had a cutlet in so long that he ate 4. "It's delicious. I've never eaten anything like it. I made it myself." Jill didn't recognize herself around Steve. He made her as simple as he was, and she didn't want to pretend to be serious. He was happy to accept people for who they were. In fact, that's what attracted him to people. Earl went back to the post for another hour of fishing and then home. The fish needed to be taken to town for the market. "How do you like it here, Jill?" Steve turned to her. "Honestly, it was the best 2 weeks of my life." Jill loved it, this quiet corner of Siberia. She often didn't let her niece go to kindergarten with pleasure, played with her, took her for walks, took her to the club where Steve entertained the kids with his guitar a couple of times a week and played hide. And seek with everyone. then chatted with Steve, watching the kids frolic. He kept inviting her out for evening walks, but she'd only gone out with him once and she'd been so reluctant. Jill's eyes lit up and she got prettier. Steve took the tips of her braid and almost rolled his nose with it. Jill laughed again. "Jill, let's go out tonight." He fell in love. Jill noticed this in how he looked at her tenderly and how he sought to meet her. Steve was a good man, kind and easy and pleasant to be with. But she had no feelings for him. That's why she didn't want to get her hopes up. "Oh, I don't know. Come out at least for an hour." Jill stood up, sweetly, stretching. "Ah, what fresh air, my God. There's water and grass and sky in it. All right, come over." "All right," Jill agreed. "And where did you go so well?" Lily stopped behind Jill before she left and smiled. The older sister looked fresh, fiddling with her stilettos. "There's more falling out here. Let me help," Lily said. And, taking a bobby pin, she fixed Jill's hair. The voluminous hair, the bun at the back of the head, gave her sister a special charm. "So where are we going so pretty?" Jill replied as casually as possible. "Yeah, Steve keeps asking to go out. We made a deal with him today. You don't need my help, do you?" "No, of course you go. I'm not a little girl anymore." "Yeah." Jill smiled at a bewildered look and started throwing a woolen scarf over her shoulders over her colored jacket. It's cold in the evenings and it makes her breasts seem smaller. Jill was not happy with the opulence of her own bust. She had always wanted to be more delicate and fragile, but, as one grandmother used to say, there was no escaping nature in their village. "Do you like Steve, Jill?" Lily asked slyly. "Wait, don't rush. I'll introduce you to Derek. He's coming to visit us next week." "Oh, come on, Lily, about Derek." "What about Steve?" "No, he doesn't bring up anything like that in me. Probably not my type, but I like him as a person. I like simple and open. I'm like that myself." "That's you. You're open." "Well, I don't know." Jill shrugged and paused. She adjusted her handkerchief once more. "Yes, it's open," she answered a little offensively. "It's just that life has taught me not to open up to everyone, but only to those who inspire trust. Otherwise it hurts too often. Oh, and one more thing. If I get back late in the morning, I might oversleep. I made Kylie's dress there. It will be comfortable to run in the band. I hung it on the crib. That was quick." "Well, thank you, sister. I've got my hands in the right place for this sort of thing." Jill opened the gate without creaking. Steve was waiting for her outside, with his hat on his head. "How long have you been standing there?" "You should have called me because I wasn't in a hurry." "I didn't want to rush you." They walked hand in hand down the quiet street. "I'm sorry there were no flowers. I felt sorry for them. They were just blooming. They have a short life as it is." "Oh, gee, Steve, don't make it up. I don't need them today. I wanted to get you another present." "Yeah, I left it in my jacket at work. I'm going to paint the radiators there today while the kids are on vacation. Let's go out and show you my class." "Will they let us in?" "Are you kidding? At least I can live there. I have keys. We have complete trust with the director." "Beautiful woman." Jill squinted. "Yes, she's sensitive, gentle, kind. I married her, but she's old enough to be my grandmother. She's 71 years old." Jill laughed. The road to the school went uphill. Outside the indoor club, young people were laughing. Jill asked Steve about his mother. She remembered him saying during a fishing trip that he lived with the same father. It turned out that Steve's mother had been gone for another 15 years. She fell ill, suffered a long time, and died. They had an older brother at home, got married and moved out, and Steve brought his wife to his house. Dad couldn't live alone. "I'm sorry about your mother. Were you just a kid?" "Yeah, me too. I went away to college that fall. I lived in a dormitory there, but city life was not for me. I went back to my hometown. And there's the school." Wait, you can stumble here. It's a stupid hole. You have to step over it. The long one. Story building was drowned in the dense gloom of evening. Steve handed Jill a matchbook and asked her to dedicate it outside the building. They were walking down a dark corridor, holding hands. No lights on, their footsteps echoing on the floor, and Jill was creepy. What if a ghost is about to come out of some class? It's at times like this that all childhood horror stories come to mind. It doesn't matter how old you are, 5, 15, or 32, it's equally scary. Steve led her confidently to the end of the hallway. The air in the school was saturated with paint and books and old wood, and there was also some childish smell. Steve opened the door. The classroom was lit only by the moon. Shadows from the trees stretched out. The lights decided not to be on. Steve rummaged through a closet of old textbooks and pulled out a kerosene lamp. It's beautiful, a rarity. Sometimes there's no light, and in winter there's no weather. It's dim in the classroom. I light it for the kids, and it immediately gives them a warm and cozy atmosphere. He put the lamp on the table and held a match to it, and when the lamp was lit, the fire immediately diminished. Well, actually, why did we come here? Steve took his jacket off the nails on the wall and reached into his inside pocket. Jill was intrigued to see if there was some wooden figurine he had made himself, a beautiful pebble from the lake. What else could an ordinary countryman give as a gift? Steve pulled out a black velvet pouch, and Jill got ready to see some nice trinket. But then, under the yellow light of the street lamp, Steve pulled from the pouch jewelry that glittered in silver. He spread out this beauty so that Jill could see it better. What is it? The bracelet. Steve answered succinctly. Do you like it? Did you buy it? He looks expensive. I can't accept it. Don't worry, I got a good deal on it. I have a friend, a jeweler, who makes jewelry and sells it at fairs. Understand, Steve, I don't want to owe you anything. We haven't known each other that long, staggered Jill. The bracelet was very beautiful. Things like that fall in love at first sight. You won't have to. It's just from the heart. Do you know what this stone is? It's only found here at the lake. It's not found anywhere else in the world. Jill looked it over. It was greenish blue. There were white patterns across it, like lace, and on the glass, like the feathers of an angel that had fallen from its wings, finished her thought. It was as if Steve could hear what she was thinking. That's why it was named after the angels. It is a very good stone. Even in witchcraft, it is used exclusively for good purposes to help keep it safe. It nullifies evil and brings true love and good luck to its master. He took Jill's hand and put the bracelet on her. It's just that your eyes are the same color, deep with green. I saw him and knew he was made for you. I wasn't expecting that. Thank you, Steve. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Jill stared at the bracelet in fascination. And you look in the mirror more often. I haven't seen beauty like yours yet either. And it's not even your looks. You have a pure soul. And you, Steve, you see. Steve didn't listen to her, but pulled her to him and kissed her. Jill pulled away from Steve. She hadn't expected such a quick turn of events. The light from the kerosene lamp fell on their faces, and by the gleam in his eyes, by the feelings reflected in them, Jill could see that he had made up his mind. She turned away and wrapped her scarf tightly around herself. It was both cold and hot at the same time. Why did you do that? Isn't it too early for kisses? I just couldn't help myself. I like you a lot. I think you have it all planned. The bracelet you gave me. Take it back, Jill fiddled nervously with her hair in excitement. Steve took her hands. Jill, I gave it to you out of the goodness of my heart, without expecting anything in return. Please keep it for yourself. Steve, understand, I don't want to get your hopes up. Don't you like me at all? Don't I have a chance? D. I sighed heavily. She remembered both her husband and John. The first had left behind something warm, but not reverent, and the second was still the same nightmare field, that had formed in her soul, which had grown wild grass over the years, grass rather than new crops. How much strength does it take to uproot this grass and sow the field with new grain? Shouldn't we just be determined to turn over a new leaf? Believe in the sincerity of the other and bare your soul to him. I don't know what to say yet. It's all too fast. I need to think about it. And as a man, Steve, please don't, said Jill. Let's go home now. It's late. I've upset you. It's all my past wounds. You don't have to see me off. No way. They returned feeling uncomfortable. Jill became silent, brooding in front of the house. Steve took her hand. I've never met a woman like that before, he said. He kissed Jill's hand and left. During the night, Jill agonized, thinking over her whole life, realizing that she couldn't go on like this, that it was high time to put an end to the past, to let it go. She thought of home, of her native places, and didn't want to go back there at all. How could she stay here? She wouldn't be hanging on her sister's neck. She had a family of her own. And Steve, maybe she could have loved him, except she didn't want to force herself into it. Love should suddenly erupt, take over, color the gray sky with delicate pink, delightful colors. Grow a green apple on the horizon, such a fresh, new, juicy apple to feel. That's exactly what Jill wanted. After all, she was still young. She could still love like that. In the morning, Jill woke up completely devastated. Lily and the baby were gone. Jill hadn't even heard them gather, and Kylie must have been giggling out of habit. Earl's footsteps coming from the yard. Jill pulled back the curtain and saw that Earl was out there, changing the old rotten boards. She made herself a coffee drink and a sandwich and went out into the fresh air. When she saw the cat nearby, Jill petted it and shared a piece of sausage. Why are you like this? Earl asked. Did you have a drink with Steve? Have you been out for a long time? Wait. So many questions this morning. Jill fixed her hair. She'd forgotten to brush her hair. Earl was meticulously working the boards. Jill thought Lily was lucky to have a husband who loved and cared for her. A dependable man. We didn't go out for a long time, and we certainly didn't drink. I just couldn't sleep. I had all kinds of thoughts. So what's going on with you and Steve? You can share anything with me. Everything stays between us. Oh, I don't know, Earl, about Steve. I can't live like this when everything is straight. I lived like this with my husband. It wasn't bad, of course, but it didn't fly, without exciting feelings. Sometimes the feeling fades with time, but I want to be caught at first sight. It happened to me once. Where is your love now? Married someone else. Earl sighed and picked up the heavy board. The women themselves don't know what they want. Suddenly there was a stir in the neighbor's yard. Eva, with her look on her face, this time in a rather cheerful voice, was pushing the boys to the exit, and then she herself appeared with a smile on her face, and behind her came out of the house none other than the father of the family, and started locking the front door. Earl smiled. We're reconciled. So Harry glowered and beckoned Earl to the fence. Be a friend. Lent me your camera. We went to the lake with the family. I ran out of film. Oh, Eva cried out, so loudly that their yard dog jumped up into the window. I forgot my lipstick. What do you need it for? You're beautiful as you are, my husband replied. No, give me the keys. Harry handed her the key, hugged her tightly, and stroked her on the shoulder. Eva made eyes at him and ran into the house. Jill noticed the beautiful gold earrings in her ears. They must be the same ones she'd kicked her husband out for. Are we reconciled? Thank God, Earl asked. Yeah, I didn't drink for a week last night. Now it's high time. Congratulations. I'll get the camera out now. Steve didn't bother her for a few days. Saturday they went to the club again. He was there too. His guitar sounded soulful. and in some places piercing. Steve played and looked at Jill. She would look away, then no, then yes at him. He had already become close to her. He had a corner of her heart. But something kept Jill from letting him go on to fill her and heal her. Steve asked Jill to dance. She put her hand on his shoulder. The bracelet was still hanging on her wrist. Thank you for not taking it off. It means you really like it. Honestly, I took it off, but it's like it completes me. When I'm with him, it's like she's some kind of protection for me. Steve smiled. The music became more intense, and they spun around the hall. And he wished he could, but he couldn't take his eyes off Jill's face. Will she give him a chance? Would he be able to win her over? Jill's temper was not an easy, hard one. Steve waited for her to give him at least a hint. He didn't dare go through with it lest he scare off this stroppy dope. On Tuesday, Derek arrived. The hosts were welcoming their guest, and the neighbor's dog was still barking a greeting. Jill fixed the napkins on the set table. She realized she was a little worried. Lily flew into the hall with a broad smile. The men followed her. Derek, tall and thoroughly thoroughbred, fully matching the pleasant timbre of his voice, couldn't take his eyes off of Jill. Here, Jill, I'd like you to meet our friend Derek, Lily proudly announced. Derek knew how to impress women. Just look at Lily. Even in front of her husband, she couldn't hide her admiration for a guest who was soft with her and showed little interest. After all, she was the wife of Lily's husband's friend. This amused, and Jill was a little surprised. And Derek was holding on as if he was the most welcome guest in the world, and by his mere presence bestowed unheard of happiness on everyone. After neutral talk and funny stories, when everyone had relaxed from reasonable doses of alcohol, Derek decided to go directly to Jill. By this time, he had already managed to charm her. What do you do, Gil? Where do you work? Not working yet. This is the uncertain stage of my life. I'm at a crossroads, so to speak. Derek didn't quite understand what it was like to live and not work. If you're a serious person and not one of the dregs of society, there was something of the first disappointment in his eyes. And what do you live on? Does someone support you? Jill felt hurt. I don't need any content, she answered indignantly. It's just that while we were deciding on a permanent place to live, we were thinking of staying at my sister's. Doubtful, Derek smiled and gestured around the room and the owners, indicating the obviousness of the situation. So they have their own family. And the third, as they say, is always superfluous, unless you want to get married quick. That would solve a lot of issues. Jump out. Jill's eyes widened, as if she were puffed up with indignation. How insensitive was that? Earl sensing the smell of frying. Derek, why are you interrogating me? He stood up for his cousin. His friends sometimes didn't realize it was getting impolite. Jill's ranting. She's got enough deadbeats. She's never been here recovering from losing her husband. Well, I told you. Earl brought his eyes meaningfully to Derek, trying to mentally convey that it was time to end the subject. Derek understood. Jill, I'm sorry if I offended you. I didn't mean to. I just thought we were adults and could speak directly. And your opinion is, of course, the ultimate truth. You allow me to express it directly. So handsome and charming at first, Jill started to like the man less and less. Music, Earl, suddenly Lily cried out. It's about time for music. Let's have a little dance. Earl nodded and held out his hand to the tape recorder on the nightstand behind him. He had prepared the tape in advance, and all he had to do was push the button. A light dance tune began to play. Everyone started to dance. Derek looked at Jill and smiled as if nothing had happened. Jill, come on. Her sister grabbed her by the arm and dragged her along. Come on, you two, Derek. Don't just sit there. She turned up the volume. Derek moved closer to Jill. She noticed that his gaze slowed. Earl had been spiking other alcohol all evening, but while they were sitting, it wasn't as noticeable. Jill, you are a very beautiful girl. I used to look at your picture a lot when I visited. And here you are in front of me, grown up, of course, but still beautiful. He kissed his hand. Jill smiled sourly. It made her want to leave, at least go outside. She danced a little for propriety's sake, and later went out under the pretext of need. The sky was overcast, no stars in sight. And only a bright spot tells where the moon is, though it is summer. As soon as the sun disappears, I see Siberia. Jill returned silently to the hallway, threw on her jacket, and stepped outside the courtyard. The cat followed her, then lunged forward and began playfully attacking the nocturnal insects. Then she was silent, looking back at Jill, as if trying to agree on where the two of them should go. Jill wanted to see Steve's house. Would the lights be on in his windows? Would his silhouette flicker behind the curtains? She didn't want to admit it to herself either. Why was she in such a hurry? And why did she care about Steve? Just curious and nothing more. Why? Sometimes you can do something for no reason under the influence of a vague impulse, especially if no one knows about it. At the same time she was thinking about her guest, she didn't understand why her sister was praising him so much. She did not feel the same way about Steve. Why this handsome but tactless and demanding towards other, barely familiar people could make a wonderful couple for Jill, and simple-looking, but sincere, pure in his thoughts, Steve is not. Why did something instinctive feminine stir in her chest at the first sight of Derek? But her brain tells her that in all probability it will be the same rake as with John's first love, that he seems to be looking for some kind of advantage in Jill, examining her in a masterly, cold, evaluating way. And why did nothing move from Steve? But there was something warm and tender and real in her heart, something that if you refused it, you would regret and remember for the rest of your life. After all, that bit of warmth in her heart was growing, albeit very slowly. So it seemed to Jill. She heard the sound of a guitar as she approached Steve's yard. His notes sounded tentative and fragmented, silenced, and then started up again, as if the musician was learning something new. The light was only on in one window, and from there a sound came through the open shutter. It was sad and hopeful, and at the same time cheerful, as if the author was trying to cheer up and not to lose heart, because he was singing about love, though not mutual, but love nonetheless. Chill ran down Jill's body. She heard her name in the uncomplicated song. Jill, Jill. I'm singing to you, Jill, Jill, about my love. Jill, my darling, maybe the stars whisper in the window that I'm meant to be with you. The guitar shrieked, not at all melodically, and Jill saw him stroll across the room. She smiled and was touched by those simple, sincere words. She was coming home. As the cat followed her, Jill walked and involuntarily hummed the last memorized lines that made her feel infinitely more alone. The stars whisper that I am destined to be with you. I knew you wouldn't like him. And this one's all invite, introduce, said Earl, and pushed the flower away from his face. And how could you know that? You are the honorable husband, ironically, Lily clarified, because Jill is not stupid. She doesn't look as dazzling in appearance as some people. You mean me? Who else could it be? I saw you in front of him. Lily swallowed a crowbar so sharply and looked at her husband in confusion, as if she'd been caught doing something shameful. Yes, I understand. Beauty is forgiven. Sun was shining brightly. It was hot. They had a table in the yard under the apple tree, and Earl made the perfect fish at it. Derek had left in the morning, calling for everyone to visit, especially Gil promising a signature kebab. Right, Jill, what's wrong with Derek? I think he's perfect, Lily said, and she covered her mouth with the palm of her hand, looking at her husband guiltily. No, Earl, you're my best. Don't think so. I just want Jill to get settled. Well, I didn't like it. I'm sorry, sis. I thought it was too desolate and too demanding. I don't want to put myself in the frame of someone else's strange ideas of what a woman should be. Let him look for himself among young women who do not know what they want and are ready to please her husband and adjust to his whims. And I can't be changed. I am what I am. And if you don't like it, goodbye, I can't stand it. But he's a successful, well-established man. Maybe he would try to steer you in the right direction for good reason. He's a pet tyrant, Earl said, not raising his eyes from the fish he pulled the bones out of. That's not true, Lily resented. Why did his wife divorce him? Don't you know? Because she didn't want to compromise. Is that what he told you? And I know exactly why he laid hands on her. Because she disobeyed her husband at first. And they were fine, as long as his wife laid down under him. And then she got tired of being a powerless appendage. So Derek started taking harsher measures. You didn't tell me that. And you didn't ask. And anyway, he's my friend. It's not fair to denigrate a friend. But you, Jill, are my own. So I think it's my duty to warn you about the things I know. You've suffered enough as it is. Derek may seem perfect, but that's the kind of thing he does. Know this. Thanks, Earl. Jill smiled. You could have told me, Lily pouted. She'd already had time to imagine how beautiful her sister and Derek would make babies. I thought about it. I just didn't want to spoil the idea of him beforehand. I thought maybe he'd changed, rethought his behavior. But from what he said yesterday, Derek was still the same. So maybe you, Jill, on the other hand, would change it to suit you. You're the one with the personality. And I don't want to struggle in a relationship. I want everything to be smooth so we don't have to work each other out, so we can be two halves of the same fate. Over the next few weeks, Steve and Jill saw each other infrequently. He didn't ask her out, only met her at the club. When Jill took her niece there for games, they chatted about neutral things like friends. Jill was pleased with his tender, amorous looks and how he was attentive and careful with her. She even wanted to go out with him tonight. But perhaps she was too direct with him that night at school. But Steve did ask, "What do you think of the guest? Did I hear they tried to match you up?" "Oh, you can't hide anything. How did you know?" "I have a brother, your neighbor, remember? I didn't consider him as a groom. I didn't like him at all." Steve was quiet, watching the boys frolicking outside the clubhouse porch. "What do I have to do to make you like me?" "Jill, what to be? Being yourself. You just have to be yourself." Suddenly she glowed and ran up to her niece, who was playing catch-up in a rush. But everyone had no time to catch up with her. "Come on, Steve, something fun. I will sing you ditties. You help me. If I lie a little, don't scold me." It was like an electric shock to the kids. Everybody loved Stevie's ditties. Everyone started dancing, but Steve wasn't in the mood for children's songs. More for adult songs, probably because he was thinking about Jill and his frank desires. Steve started to sing a little bit dirty, intricate songs. The kids didn't understand the words anyway. They just wanted the melody. Jill cut him off and bulging her eyes in anger. She continued to laugh. She couldn't contain her amusement. The kids were ecstatic, jumping around and yelling more. More okay. Okay, Steve laughed. "Jill, don't get the idea. I'm not a slob. I don't know how it got out of hand. Sometimes the guitar dictates the rules. That's okay. Just don't do it in front of the kids again." "Okay. Can we do this in front of adults?" Jill swiped her palm thoughtfully and they started to say goodbye. "Are you all right, Jill?" "Yes, it's true. Sometimes it's a bit boring. How would you like to be our nurse?" "Kate wants to retire, but there's no one to replace her. I ran into her the other day. I'd like that, but it would mean staying here forever. I don't know. I'll introduce you to Kate." "Stay, Jill. I told you so the day I met you, and I'm telling you now. You make our village seem brighter. Or maybe it's just you. But you yourself are in love with our humble corner of the world. Isn't it?" "Yes," Jill admitted. "I'll think about the nurse." Jill came down from the porch holding hands with her niece. "There's nothing to think about. I'll talk to Kate tomorrow, or maybe today she'll be glad. The old lady can't just leave her post without a replacement. I haven't thought of anything yet, but Steve ignored her. He suddenly seemed to make up his mind and called out to her in a strained voice. He clutched the accordion firmly in his hands. Jill, let's go for a walk. Maybe we could go to the lake. The water was getting warm. I could go for a walk. Jill smiled over his shoulder. You and Steve again? I don't know. Jill, I don't know what you see in him. He's a simple country boy. Lily was curiously peering into the nurse's station lockers. Jill had a backlog of paperwork from her new job. Kate, the former nurse, wasn't too bothered about it. After work, she was going to go to the lake in the winter for a swim. But he's sincere and real, and he loves me so much. But there's nothing between us yet. Would you like to? I don't know. We'll see. So you like him? Lily didn't let up. I have more important things to deal with. Am I staying here? I need a place to live. I don't have all the time in the world to sit on your shoulders. You're not bothering us at all. You'll marry Steve and move in with him. Lily made a caricature of a kiss. Jill tossed a crumpled piece of paper at her. Lily nodded and accidentally dropped the vial, picking it up and wiping her dress. Sorry, it didn't seem to break. It's okay. What about housing? I have an apartment nearby. That's what I'll buy. Maybe I'll bring my mother if she wants. I'm used to living in my own territory. I don't want to feel like a burden. Move in. I'd feel safer that way. Lily put the test tube back, closed the lockers, and moved the hell away from Jill's desk. There, she thoughtlessly flipped through the boring medical files. Oh, Kate's handwriting. The devil himself can't make it out. They say she is blind, so she writes without seeing her own letters. She stood up and took off her white medical gown. Okay, we can go. Steve's probably waiting. He's always early. Shut up. Jill waved the keys at her. Steve, of course, was already waiting for her at the exit of the village toward the lake. He was sitting in the tall grass, smoking, and Jill didn't notice him right away. She walked past him first, looking around. Where are you going? Oh, you scared me. Jill clutched at her heart. Steve squinted into a smile, stood up, and caught up with her. Did you get your swimsuit? I'm already wearing it. I love the heat. Me too. Especially August, when it already feels like autumn and the whole nature becomes kind of crystal. It freezes in anticipation of love. Poetic. They went further along the road, on either side of the dusty country road. The grass and the lake glistened before them. So welcoming, so beckoning to them, the coolness and blue waters. But in the open, the water was too cold. It took about 20 minutes to walk to the cove where it warms up. We settled on the shore to the side. There were plenty of people. Jill undressed. A yellow swimsuit with oversized panties in the fashion of the day. Steve tried to appreciate Jill's figure. Steve, stop looking at me like that. People will notice. I'm sorry, it's just the first time I've seen you like this. When Jill touched her feet to the water, she thought she had stepped on ice. And people are swimming. They're used to it. Steve went into the water. Either he shrank in front of Jill, or he really was that hardened. Come on, Jill. Take a dip and you'll get used to it in no time. Jill made up her mind. The sand slipped between her fingers. Steve held out his hand to her, and they went deep. They swam. The water was purest and clearest. The sun was blinding. Then they sunbathed on the shore. Jill looked at Steve and listened to his simple stories and opened her heart to him. Slowly evening approached. They grabbed a bite to eat, got dressed, and started walking along the shore. They stopped at a small wooden jetty. Jill wanted to be frank. It was as if nature herself was coaxing her to open up. She told Steve about both the betrayal and the lies to her. She was beginning to trust, determined to give herself another chance at happiness. But how hard it can sometimes be to put her hands in someone else's heart and be sure that they will warm it. But that scoundrel Paul, who treated you like that, will be punished by life. I'd bury that bastard in the ground. Don't. He's already been punished. His wife left him, sued him out of his apartment. And he doesn't show his child. You're such a good Steve. Jill squeezed his hand. She believed his words, that he would certainly stand up for her. Steve reached for her, wanting to kiss her, but Jill turned around. You don't like me at all, Jill. That's not the point. You reek of smoke. I can't get used to it. It's an ugly smell. So I'll quit. From now on, no more cigarettes, but I don't force you. It's your right. We're adults. Hey, if you had told me sooner, maybe a long time ago. But I've got the horses on corners to slow down. Why slow down? You only need to go forward without a break and together. In one fresh stream move forward and avoid the stagnant swamp in which everything perishes. Is that what you're getting so worked up about now? I don't quite know where he's going with this, Jill. No, I'm talking about love. Jill came out of the hen house with a small basket of eggs. She hadn't thought about her appearance this morning. A homemade robe, her hair under a kerchief to keep it out of the dough. She began to knead for the pie. I didn't have enough eggs. Fortunately, we have all our own in the household. She came out all by her side. A piece of hay caught on the end of her scythe, and immediately felt terribly uncomfortable. Steve is standing in the yard with his brother in a light cap. They're talking about something serious. You could tell by the worried faces. He hadn't noticed Jill, but how could she not say hello? They had been on a lot of dates, and her heart went out at the sight of him. He was cute. She fixed her white kerchief, but it didn't add to her sophistication. Hello, Steve, she said to him from the porch of the house. Steve looked at her. He was not at all happy to see her, but rather annoyed about it. Hi, Jill, he answered. And then he turned his back on his brother. Jill was hurt by this. She expected him to smile all wide, open his arms, and come to the fence to ask about her business. Well, like always anyway, not to spare her attention. What's up, maybe? Okay. Oh, and he smokes. He also has a cigarette in his hand, which it's like he tried to hide it from Jill. He promised he'd quit for her. Unpleasantly surprised, Jill went out the door. Steve left about 5 minutes later. Jill watched him through the window. He was nervous. Not like himself. Jill's cherry pie didn't come out well and burned a little, and didn't soak all the way through. Apparently, the fire in the oven had been too strong. That weekend, Lily and her husband went into town together to the market, and Jill looked after little Kylie. On her return, Lily looked sympathetically at Jill, and she guessed she knew something. When was the last time you saw Jill and Steve? Oh, he came over to your neighbor's house today. He was weird. We just said hello. I don't know how to be blunt. Just tell it like it is. Lily sat down across from her and took a piece of pie and took a bite. Oops, not soaked. That's it, I think, she grimaced and spit out a cherry pit in her palm. Anyway, yesterday Steve's wife came back with her son. Well, she's kind of an ex. Who can tell? Shocked, Jill went cold. Something sticky and nasty clutched at her throat. But with all her might, she tried to keep her cool. Is she the one who dumped him years ago? Yes, her sister confirmed, muffled, devouring Kimberly's pie. You'll get nothing from me. She shouted at the cat that was reaching for her windowsill and smacked the animal lightly on the head. Why did she come back? Does she want to recreate her family? Go figure it out. What for? All the women in? The village buzzing with speculation. What about Steve? I'm shocked myself, as you can see, but he may not accept it. They have nothing in common. His father's house. Oh, Jill, you don't know Steve very well. He's a pathetic romantic. He's a country bumpkin. What have I told you more than once? No, you know, Lily shook her clenched fist expressively. There's no man's core in him. That's the kind of man they make rope out of. Now his ex-wife's going to tell him that she's come to her senses, that she loves him and all that. And in the city, she's just a tail on him, and Steve will take her in out of pity. Jill ate an even slice of her pie, not eating it, just thoughtfully grinding it into crumbs. Lily's weather wrinkles at the sight of her between her eyebrows saddened her. Jill, nothing is yet known. I know you've grown attached to him. And he's in love with you, and everyone can see it. He wouldn't dare do that to you. But there was nothing like that between us. I kept putting it off, afraid. Jill didn't know if she regretted being so unapproachable. Maybe if they'd had a real connection, he wouldn't have let his ex walk out the door, but she'd had time to squeeze the past out of her heart. She thought it over towards nightfall. She decided to give herself another chance at happiness. Maybe she should fight it too. Jill was going to the dance tonight. She didn't feel like going to the club. The mood was lousy, but she needed to convince Steve to at least look at her to see if he was still with her or already with the other one. But Steve was gone, and with him was missing that backwoods vibe of soulfulness. Without his guitar, without his songs, the evening seemed dull. Jill was haunted, as she had been in her youth. Her heart trembled. What if he did come? But he didn't. On Monday, he showed up at her workplace himself, waiting on the doorstep. When the annoying granny came out, he came in and shut the door tightly. He looked guilty, thought of worried Jill. She tapped her ballpoint pen against her palm, and that alone gave away her agitated nerves. Steve stepped with his foot. Shall I sit down? Jill pointed him to a patient chair. Please. The chirping of birds flew in through the open window, so out of place, a truck drove down the road from the nurse's station windows. And Jill was suddenly so eager to feel the blazing sun. Under it, everything seemed less serious than in the sobering chill. Well, you already know, I guess. Steve started awkwardly. I know about your ex-wife. Happy birthday to you. I haven't been in love for a long time. And when I met you, Jill interrupted. Why did you let him in then? There's nowhere to go. She's on loan. She has housing problems. She was fired from her job. She can't pay for her rented apartment. And there's no way she can get an apartment on the waiting list. And complaints about her parents are far from good, and she's used to it here too. So she doesn't want any of that, does she? No claim on you? Well, laughed Steve. He wants to, but it's not going to happen. Wait, you said she got married and I heard about the baby. I can't kick her out with the baby. Get out. Jill, I love you. He walked up to her, took her by the elbows, and turned her violently toward him. Why are you so cold? Why do not you believe me? Marriage to her is just a formality. And then what? Or maybe I was waiting for a catch. And here it is, I've been unlucky in love all my life. I was cut and cut by everyone I loved, and they drank blood out of me, and I let them because I loved, and I didn't want that anymore. And I don't have that blood in me anymore. And it was only with you that I began to fill up and come alive with loud despair. Jill confessed, I live with you too. Then why are you yelling? Because you're yelling. He gleamed his eyes, drew her to him, and kissed her greedily, passionately. She dazed in surprise and pushed him away. With my wife sorted out, she said calmly, adjusting her robe. All right, Steve nodded and walked resolutely out the door. Lily sat down on the tree and grasped a large branch, shook the tree with all her might. Red apples fell in a hailstorm on the ground. She began to collect them in a bucket. I've seen Maria. She's not the same person she was 5 years ago. Once she had a baby, that was it. She became an aunt. She said, and about Jack's wife, Jill clarified. She used to be beautiful. No, I never have been. But she seemed well-groomed. I wondered if I looked like an aunt now, too. Tell me the truth, I wouldn't be offended. Jill held out one apple and took a bite. I didn't want to be offended. Everyone wants to be young and beautiful forever, and one's own changes in appearance don't hurt the eye so much. After all, it happens gradually. But at 17, of course, Lily was different, fresher and lighter, unencumbered by anything. Come on, sister. You're an attractive young woman. Oh, said the same thing. So you're married with a child. And that's the only reason it still sounds kind of old. So you told Winter what he was going to do with this wife of his. Told me, said he'd figure it out. Knowing Steve, he'll figure it out until the second coming. Well, I can't wait that long. And if he stays a wife, what will you do? I don't know. I'm going to live on. There was a bucket full of apples. Lily brought a basin to collect them. Let's go to Derek's for now. It's my vacation. He keeps calling. He keeps asking about you. Jill was embarrassed. Derek wasn't the most pleasant person she'd ever met, but he was handsome on the outside and a serious man. No, it's definitely not my choice. Although it caught my eye at first, I confess. People change. I'm sure he's rethinking everything. I'll stay here with yours. He and I get along just fine. What? Where? Lily gasped. Earl is my favorite, and stop praising other men. I'll take care of my own personal life. Jill waved her off and dragged the bucket of apples into the house. September was approaching, and the daylight hours were shortening. And though the sun was still blazing at night, the temperature was dropping precipitously. While it was still possible to walk in a light jacket during the day and sometimes take it off, in the evening we could not do without a fall jacket. With my sister, we went to the woods. Steve missed it altogether. Though Jill had heard he was playing at the club on Saturday, she didn't go there herself anymore, deliberately neglected their communication, and she avoided his house. On one of the last days of the summer, Jill decided to go downtown. She had to get some clothes, and we were almost out of shampoo and face cream. The best thing to do was to go home and deal with the sale of the apartment. But the uncertainty of tomorrow stopped her. Would she be able to live in this village with Steve if he stayed with his wife? Would these places seem as beautiful and clean? And what would it be like to be alone? It's worth admitting. It was Steve who filled them with romance and spark. It was because of his courtship, his sincerity. But was he really a cheater? Jill felt young again. It was he who made her believe that nothing was finished, that the best was just ahead of her. Jill sat on the bus behind her. The women smelled like pure country, cows, chickens, and someone who clearly hadn't bathed in a long time. Jill herself had always taken great care of her appearance, especially when she had been out in public recently. She began to style her hair in a pile. It was cuter that way and more age, appropriate than a simple braid. As the bus was about to fill up, Jill was immersed in her thoughts. Steve entered the cabin. There was a woman with him. She shot a tentative glance at the passengers and said hello carefully, as if she feared someone might jump on her with accusations. The women fell silent for a moment. Good morning to you too, Maria, a granny answered her. And someone also said hello. So that's what she is, thought frozen Jill. She's not what I thought she'd look like. That's too bad. Maybe she really does have nowhere to go. Maybe Steve was her only hope. Steve saw Jill. He changed his face. He nodded and sat down with his wife in the middle of the cabin. All the way there, Jill couldn't stop watching them, no matter how hard she tried to force herself to look out the window. He barely spoke to his wife. They exchanged a couple of flaccid phrases during the entire half-hour trip. They were among the first to arrive, got off the bus and walked briskly toward the center. No, that's not the way to do it, Jill thought as she wandered through the stores. Let them live. For God's sake, let them live. I'll be fine on my own. When Jill got home, she wasn't herself for a day. Then she told her sister, That's it, I'm going home. I've had enough adventures. What about Derek, Jill? But why not give him another chance? Yeah, fuck your Derek and fuck Steve too. Let them both go. Lily stepped away from her husband and stared in surprise. Suddenly she realized she heard noises. Reluctantly she got up, went to the window and peered out. "What's that?" she wondered. "What's the matter with you?" my husband asked. "It's okay, Steve plays outside." Lily muttered. "Did you come to our Jill with a bow? Come out and tell her she's not here. She's straining her cords for nothing. This is your woman's business. I don't want to get involved." Lily corrected the received voice, threw on her jacket, and walked across the yard in her old boots, stomped on by the troopers. Steve must have noticed what was going on at the door. He started to play more cheerfully, and he sang a song once composed for Jill. "Jill, Jill, Jill, I'm singing to you. Jill, 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 about my love. Jill, Jill, honey. Look out your window, the stars are whispering that I'm destined to be with you." Even though he saw evil Lily in front of him on the last lines instead of sweet Jill, Steve still sang. The guitar is a symbol for Lily. The other thing was Jill. There were many things he wanted to say to her and hold her hand. And after she forgave him to kiss her. To begin with, he patted his blue eyes at Lily confusedly. She had meddled in the intimate moments of their relationship with Jill, but she obviously hadn't even realized it. "What do you want, Steve?" asked Lily, disgruntled and coldly. "You too. Hi, Lily. Jill, can you get me? What do you need it for?" Steve smiled with one mouth. "Jill, go get her. We'll take care of her ourselves. We're not little kids." Spoken like, "We're not enemies, and I didn't come to see you. I came to see Jill. She's the one I want to talk to." She was in the middle of a conversation with Jill. She left on a call. The car was taken away. Steve nodded. There was a sense of hostility in Lily. "When will she be back? Maybe at night, I don't know. Tell her I came by. Will you tell her I came by, will you? Tell her to stop by my school tomorrow." "Oh, okay," Lily sighed impatiently. "Come on, I don't have time for this. You took me away from the movie." At the most interesting moment, she returned to the house and ducked under the arm of her husband with a sigh of relief. She was no longer interested in the plot of the movie. She would not say anything to Jill. She had a train tomorrow lunchtime. Let her go home. Everything had been decided about the job, too. Jill had made up her mind purely out of the goodness of her heart. She went out on a call that night. Jill got home. It was close to midnight. The house was quiet and dark. Bags are packed on a chair, hanging the essentials she'll wear on the road tomorrow. Heavy on Jill's heart despite her firm decision. It was as if she was walking one path, and on the last steps, she turned back. Didn't live up to that twist of fate. But sitting and waiting was not in her principles. Earl was taking her to the station. Someday she would surely see these places again, show them to her mother. The city was behind her, mirrored and cold, but so exciting to her soul. The small station was crowded. The train was an hour away. Earl helped Jill carry her bags to the platform. "You go, Earl. I'll sit myself down," Jill told her son-in-law. She smiled sadly at the loss of the bracelet Steve had given her. "Do you want to take it off?" "I should have thrown it away." She liked him too much. It was as if he was part of the sincere, good-natured Steve she knew him to be. "It certainly wasn't hard for me at first. I can keep you company." No. I really want to be alone with my thoughts. Sit here on the bench." Earl put his arm around her. "You're a good woman, Jill. Don't be sad. Men don't make you happy. I know that, but what is it?" "Well, happiness is like an innate ability. It's in the soul. And others spend their whole lives looking for it and suffering from failure because it's inside. Are you happy yourself?" "I think so." "So you're a lucky man." Jill shook his hand, they kissed, and he went home. For 50 minutes, Jill sat almost motionless, and 10 minutes before the train left, she dragged her 2 bags closer to the handful of people who had formed. When, in the distance, The head of the train emerged from behind the trees and the rest of the cars showed. The silence of the peaceful station was broken by the roar of an engine. A three-wheeled motorcycle with two passengers swerved and braked sharply on the grass, closer to the platform. Jill recognized Steve with surprise. How I feared I wouldn't make it. He jumped out of the stroller, losing his invariable cap on the tape in the process. It remained lying on the ground. How did you know I was here? My brother said you left with the bags. I came to see you yesterday, so they didn't tell you anything. Steve, it's the train. I'm sick of everything. I'm going home. Train was inexorably approaching the station. No, I'm not letting you go anywhere. You have a wife. Jill was indignant. The rest of the passengers were all watching the love drama unfold before their eyes. Yes, we're getting a divorce. The papers have already been filed. Remember the district center? I went with her. That's the day we filed. We're not going to live. I told her everything. That I have you. That I love you, period. She's leaving in 2 days to visit her parents and her children. Why didn't you come? Didn't tell me. There's no way I could have intercepted you. Citizens, let's go in. Let's go in. Standing 3 minutes, shouted the conductor. Jill was the only one left on the platform, looking at her with pleading eyes. Curious faces peered out of the windows. No, Steve, I'm not going. I'm going home. It's better this way. And you haven't divorced your wife in a long time. I guess they put doubts in your head, huh? Jill picked up the bags, but Steve grabbed her hand and ripped them out. Jill, you're not going anywhere. It's all meant to be. You're mine. Let go, Steve. Jill resisted. Woman, come in immediately. The conductor began to get annoyed. Jill snatched his bags, showed the conductor the ticket, and climbed into the carriage. Everything inside her was pounding. Her heart was torn to Steve. But her pride and stubbornness took over and drove her home. Barely restraining her tears, she dragged the bags through the plain carriage and cried in her eyes. Girl, one of the women cried out, and everyone on the right side rushed to the windows. Steve, who'd made it to the bike, was catching up with the slow-moving train. A guitar dangled from his chest. Let me in. It was a matter of life and death, for Christ's sake, Steve pleaded. But Jill couldn't hear him. She froze in the aisle. It was like it wasn't happening to her. It was like a movie. She heard the conductor's indignation, and that carriage of the speeding train. Steve burst in. He walked toward Jill, and his eyes glittered. Steve played, the music filling the carriage. Steve maneuvered between the passengers. Everyone in front of him parted a dozen paces in front of Jill, and he sang, I have you alone, like the moon in the night, like the spring of the year, like a pine tree in the steppe. There is no other like you beyond any river, nor beyond the mists of distant lands. Steve, stop it, stop it. Jill grabbed the piston of the floor, turned her face away so he wouldn't see that she was about to cry. Steve had been singing while still on the train, coming close to her. Only a guitar separated them. You can give up your peace. You can wave your hand. You can give up your debts. You can love others. You can love others. You can leave altogether. Just shine, shine. Jill, look at me, Jill. Jill looked. Her lips trembled. Steve sang calmly, as if they were alone on the train, as if there were no one else on earth. I have you alone like the moon. You're the only one I've got. You're the only one I've got. You're the only one I've got. He went down to the vacant seat and touched her fearfully. Jill lowered her eyes. Steve stroked her shoulder. Jill, I love you. I'm sorry for everything. Jill had already forgotten what she was supposed to forgive him for. She was overwhelmed by a storm of emotion. The sweet emotion that makes you feel so light that you feel like you're about to meet it. Forgive his daughter. As he sings, gloriously in love. Forgive him. Forgive him. I heard it from all sides. There was Jill in public, and she hugged him. Kiss her. Kiss me already. Don't just stand there like an idiot. Jill and Steve laughed through their tears. They kissed modestly. One of the seated passengers clapped his hands. Others joined in. Steve hugged her, held her tightly to him, and whispered again, "I have you alone, Jill, alone." Then they drowned in each other's eyes for a moment. He hers in green ones, and she in his blue ones, and she in his blue ones, like that sweet city. The clearest day in May. Went to the exit. "We're at the next station, let's go." Sweet Jill nodded excitedly. "All right, Steve, let's go. Thank you for being with me. Good spirits and bright colors in life, everyone. See you all again."